A Mochi moment from Sadie, who writes, I'm not crying, you're crying. This is what I said during my first appointment with my physician at Mochi, because I didn't have to convince him I needed a GLP-1. He understood, and I felt supported, not judged. I came for the weight loss and stayed for the empathy. Thanks, Sadie. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Sadie is a Mochi member compensated for her story.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, as always, text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777. Get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, and so much more. Y'all, I wasn't going to start here. I was not going to start the show with the idle gossip within Vanity Fair, and then Susie Wiles responded to it. I was like, yeah, I probably need to start with the Vanity Fair story. Vanity Fair does a profile of the White House team. And she essentially, they hang out with the White House team, and they spend a lot of time talking to Susie Wiles. And let's just say Susie Wiles is now out saying they misrepresented, they distorted, on and on and on and on and on it goes. This is her tweet. From Susie Wiles about the article, quote, "The article published early this morning is a disingenuously framed hit piece on me and the finest president, White House staff, and cabinet in history. Significant context was disregarded, and much of what I and others said about the team and the president was left out of the story. I assume after reading it that this was done to paint an overwhelmingly chaotic and negative narrative about the president and our team. The truth is that the Trump White House has already accomplished more in 11 months than any other president has accomplished in 8 years, and that is due to the unmatched leadership and vision of President Trump, for whom I have been honored to work for the better part of a decade. None of this will stop our relentless pursuit of making America great again." She sat for 11 interviews. 11 interviews. That's wild. Y'all, this is a classic game in Washington, D.C. that is played where you give lots of interviews to a reporter for a mainstream media publication, one on the left, no less. Vanity Fair is not exactly a conservative publication. It's mainstream, and you essentially unload all of the shots you want to fire, and then afterwards you say, I was out of context. How dare they? I had no idea. This is classic Washington. This is like Washington establishment insider stuff. Let me just read you this summation. Over the course of 11 interviews, Ms. Wiles offered pungent assessments of the president and his team. Mr. Trump has an alcoholic's personality. Vice President J.D. Vance has been a conspiracy theorist for a decade, and his conversion from Trump critic to ally was based not on principle, but was sort of political because he was running for Senate. Elon Musk is an avowed ketamine user and an odd duck whose actions were not always rational and left her aghast. Russell T. Vogt, the budget director, is a right-wing absolute zealot, and Attorney General Pam Bondi completely whiffed in handling the Epstein files. She also acknowledged that he was not telling the truth, Donald Trump, and he accused former President Bill Clinton of visiting the private island of sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein. That was not true. She attributes her ability to work for Mr. Trump to growing up with an alcoholic father, the sportscaster Pat Summerall. High-functioning alcoholics or alcoholics in general, their personalities are exaggerated when they drink, she said. And so I'm a little bit of an expert in big personalities. While Mr. Trump does not drink, she said, he has an alcoholic's personality and operates with a view that there's nothing he can't do. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. Kind of a wild interview about the only person who really comes out looking good is Marco Rubio, who, according to Susie Wiles, he couldn't be vice president because he's too principled. No, I'm not making that up. Let me see if I can find this again. It's a very interesting comment that Susie Wiles makes about Marco Rubio when it gets into the selection process. I asked Wiles about the remarkable 180-degree conversion of the Secretary of State and Vice President from fierce Trump critics to high-ranking acolytes and heirs apparent. Trump has floated a Vance Rubio GOP presidential ticket in 2028. Rubio's transformation was ideological and principled, she said. Marco was not the sort of person that would violate his principles. He just won't. And so he had to get there. By contrast, she suggested, Vance had other motives. His conversion came from when he was running for the Senate, and I think his conversion was a little bit more sort of political. During another visit to the White House on November 13th, when I asked Vance about his conversion to Trump loyalist, he said, quote, I realized that I actually liked him. I thought he was doing a lot of good things, and I thought that he was fundamentally the right person to save the country. Will Marco Rubio challenge Vance for the top spot? His answer, if J.D. Vance runs for president, he's going to be our nominee, and I'll be one of the first people to support him. That was from Marco Rubio. Wow. She also called the vice president a bit of a conspiracy theorist. Here's what's going on here. Let's listen. We all know how this game is played. We have seen this plenty of times. This is old school Washington, D.C. You sit down and you do a massive expose. Remember the Bush team. This is what the Bush team did. Remember the fancy shot of Condoleezza Rice and the president and all the Bush team there? Arms crossed, very business. They do the same sort of photo shoot for this piece. And what happened in that Vanity Fair piece with George W. Bush's team? A lot of the same things. A lot of people said things that came out in public, and then they scrambled and said, I disagree. This is taken out of context. This is not true. But the difference was there was actually more loyalty, way more loyalty in the Trump team with each other. They certainly had disagreements, but they had each other's back. In the Vanity Fair article now, this is a ruthless White House of people stabbing each other in the back and people not liking each other, which you all know is kind of true. Donald Trump loves the force of personalities that battle each other out. They fight in front of him, and then he makes the decision. That's the way Donald Trump's leadership style works. And I get the sense from this article that what is actually happening here is Susie Wiles is engaging in damage control for the President of the United States, recognizing some of the mistakes he's made. For example, she acknowledges after the November election didn't go the Republicans' way that the president probably needs to spend more time talking about the domestic policy issues of the United States and focusing on kitchen table issues. That phrase comes up in every administration. And maybe not spend so much time on foreign policy. You don't do 11 interviews with Vanity Fair and presume they're going to just serve as a transcription service. This is score settling, and they've got all these really creepy close-up shots. And by the way, they recorded the interviews. You know they recorded the interviews. There were 11 different interviews. They were recorded. So the denials are going to be hard to press. So, by the way, this is the other thing. This is the thing that blows my mind. We are not one full year into the Trump administration. Why? We are one full year, not one full year into the Trump administration, and this stuff is already happening. This is absurd. And I see the spin out there from a lot of conservative radio show hosts that this is a Vanity Fair hit piece on the Trump administration. What the hell did you think it was going to be? Of course it was a hit piece. It's Vanity Fair, one of the least favorable publications to the Trump administration in the history of Donald Trump being on the national stage. And the chief of staff did 11 interviews with them. But it wasn't just the chief of staff, the vice president, the secretary of state, all of the Trump personalities sat with these people. They gave these people carte blanche to interview, to roam the White House. The irony here is that Hegseth won't let reporters roam the Pentagon anymore. And over at the White House, they got a liberal Vanity Fair editor roaming the halls, asking people questions. It's kind of absurd. I'm just flabbergasted but actually I'm not. I shouldn't say I'm not. By the way, they're circling the wagons around Susie Wiles now. By far, this is from Donald Trump Jr. Susie Wiles is by far the most effective and trustworthy chief of staff that my father has ever had. When Susie took over my father's political operation after January 6th, people forgot how many Republicans were treating him like a pariah. Countless operatives, consultants, and elected Republicans thought my dad's political career was over and wanted nothing to do with him. They attacked him ruthlessly and predicted he'd lose if he ran in 2024. Not Susie. She was a loyal fighter for him from the moment she came on board. When things are tough and other supposed friends left my dad like a bunch of rats, Susie stood by his side and worked her butt off every day to rebuild his political operation and ensure his comeback would be successful. When others cowered, she stood strong. One of the other things I've always appreciated about Susie is how she has never tried to subvert my father's America First policy agenda. She's an honest broker who only cares about executing my dad's wishes on policy, which is much different than how things were in his first term, where countless staffers thought it was their job to rein him in. After securing our border, to not getting dragged into endless wars, to reining in the leftist administrative state, Susie has been a gigantic ally to the entire America First movement. Most people don't know that Susie was also the person I worked closest with on the 2024 campaign to bring RFK Jr. and the Maha movement on board. When others were skeptical of Maha, Susie immediately got it and has been one of the biggest advocates in the entire administration. She doesn't talk much about any of this stuff because she doesn't like to take credit for things, another rarity in D.C. But I have seen it with my own eyes behind the scenes for years now. I very rarely speak out about my father's staffers, but there is no one on earth more equipped to serve as my father's chief of staff than Susie. Wait, she doesn't talk much about it, just 11 interviews with Vanity Fair. Y'all, here's what's going on. I can tell you what's going on because I've seen this play over and over and over again. This is the president and the chief of staff settling scores within the administration after the first year. They're putting people in their place. The exit interviews are coming. We're going to start seeing people before the midterms wind down. There's also a weakness within the Trump administration, and it goes to the very top, and you can't deny it. The president understands that the mainstream media is useful to him, and he likes them. The president has a core portion of his base convinced that they're the enemy. The president probably spends more time talking to reporters at the New York Times than pretty much any other politician in the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. Where do you think Maggie Haberman gets most of her stuff from? She gets it from the president. You can deny it. You can lie to yourself and say it's not true, but it's true. They want the mainstream media access. And they gave them the access. And Susie Wiles said all the things she now says she's being taken out of context with. And the president and his son are circling the wagons around her and defending her because they wanted that stuff out there. The president's not upset about the comments about him and his ego. They're resetting the White House after the first year. They're getting ready for the midterms. They're settling scores. They're putting people in their place who have gotten too big for their britches. They're using Vanity Fair to do it. This is intentional. You do not give an interview to Vanity Fair. You simply don't give an interview to Vanity Fair unless you want all that stuff out there. You don't do it. You know what the results are going to be. What you do is you get it all out there, all the things you want people to know you think about these other people in the White House. So they rein it all in. It's all public now. They got to rein it in now because they're going to be judged based on the quotes. And then you say, all this is out of context. That's what you say publicly. But privately, everyone knows this is by design to reset at the board for the midterms. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I've still got 2 more putters to give away from Van Allen Golf. Here's the way it works. We're going to announce all 3 on Thursday. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow are your opportunities, 1 per day. If you text the word golf to 33777, you'll get a response back. By the way, those of you yesterday who were getting responses that kept asking for your email address, it was a bug in the system. It got fixed. I've got your email address. Don't worry about it. I got over 1,000 email addresses from yesterday. And we will randomly select one each day and get you your putters. What you do, and by the way, they're not giving them, I'm buying them for you because I want to help this young company grow. I'm friends with the guys, and I actually took the putter to my golf club this morning and let one of the golf pros there handle it, and he was mesmerized by it. The balance, the laser cut bronze. If you text the word golf to 33777, reply back with your email address. Got to have your email address. Random selection, announcing all 3 on Thursday. I'm buying you putters. Steel ceramic shaft. You can get the carbon steel or the bronze. My gosh, they're just incredible, incredible putters. I was not a big fan of the whole idea of super expensive putters until I discovered these putters. I'm like, yeah, that's worth $500. It is. If you're into golf, you understand these things. If you're not, it seems silly. Well, if you're into golf, text golf, the word golf, to 33777. Send me your email address, and 3 of you are going to get putters on me from Van Allen Golf. You can go to vanallengolf.com and check them out as well. Old Glory Bank is my bank, and they would love to be your bank. They are a nationwide bank online. They don't have retail locations. Their offices are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, High 96.9, and they will help you get a bank account. You can get checking. You can get savings. You can get business accounts. Listen, one of the reasons that Old Glory Bank was set up was because of the trend of progressive activists buying shares in banks and then pressuring banks to stop doing business with right-coded business they didn't like. And the best example, frankly, are gun dealers, gun manufacturers, gun stores. There's a big effort to shut people down from using their debit cards to be able to buy guns. Old Glory Bank stood up and said, not on our watch. We want freedom of banking. And they've expanded from there. They're one of the fastest growing banks in the country. Great for businesses, great for individuals, great for kids if you need a custodial account. And even though they're online, they've managed to figure out how you can deposit cash at the bank, and it works. I've used the feature frequently. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. OldGloryBank.com/ERICK. Check them out today. OldGloryBank.com/Eric. Veterans, first responders, active duty military. They got great deals for you. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply.
A mochi moment from Tara, who writes, "For years, all my doctor said was eat less and move more, which never worked. But you know what does? The simple eating tips from my nutritionist at Mochi. And after losing over 30 pounds, I can say you're not just another GLP-1 source. You're a life source." Thanks, Tara. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Tara is a Mochi member compensated for her story.
Well, I got to tell you, the White House is, they are really now kicking in overdrive the pushback on this Vanity Fair profile of Susie Wiles. I won't read them all to you. I will just point out that we now have statements of defense retweeted by Carolyn Levitt from Russ Vogt, Linda McMahon, Scott Turner, Brooke Rollins, Sean Duffy, Kelly Loeffler, and Lee Zeldin. Carolyn Levitt retweeting them all. Here's the problem, and I will just read you the core quote from the interview, and it is the New York Times summation of the interview. Mr. Musk has acknowledged trying ketamine a few years ago but denied reports of more recent use. In the interview with the New York Times on Monday about the Vanity Fair profile, Ms. Wiles took issue with the quote attributed to her about his drug use. That's ridiculous, she said. I wouldn't have said it, and I wouldn't know. But Mr. Whipple, the New York Times writes, the author of the Vanity Fair piece, played a tape for the New York Times in which she could be heard saying it. So, in other words, she said all this stuff and it's recorded. So the walkbacks will be delicate. When senior members of the Trump administration were posing for glamorous shots for Vanity Fair, J.D. Vance quipped to the photographer, I'll give you $100 for every person you make look really, I'll say crappy, he said another word, compared to me, and $1,000 if it's Marco. Well, the Marco Rubio photos are not flattering photos of Marco Rubio. I assume the reporter got his $1,000. Y'all, again, there are 11 interviews, all of which are recorded. This is the typical game that gets played in Washington, D.C., where people say everything they want to say, and then they say, no, not really. I didn't mean it. It's out of context. And, of course, you have the articles. We need to talk about Ukraine now, because the situation in Ukraine is, well, heating up to a degree. This is from Semaphore. I always forget Semaphore exists. U.S. and European officials agreed to provide Ukraine with NATO-style security guarantees, potentially overcoming a major hurdle to a flagging peace deal with Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump said a deal was now closer than ever, while German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said there was now a small but real chance at peace. More talks are expected this week in the United States. Kyiv appears to have dropped its bid to join NATO, but remains steadfast in its ambitions to become an EU member, a move that U.S. officials said would not be opposed by Moscow. However, Russian officials were skeptical that a peace deal might be agreed upon quickly. A Kremlin spokesman said predicting a timeline was a quote-unquote thankless task. You'll understand what's going on here. Essentially, we bring Ukraine into NATO without bringing it into NATO. That's the president's proposal. And also let them join the EU. Look, Putin already believes he's at war with Europe, so letting Ukraine join Europe just becomes more the merrier. It's an interesting situation, is it not? That the president who wants out of Ukraine is now willing to commit U.S. troops to guarantee the safety and security of Ukraine. In exchange, they've got to give the Russians the Donbas region, which the Russians haven't been able to take. I forget who it was. There's a war correspondent who noted that if you were to put a snail on the border of Russia and Ukraine, and that snail could walk straight into Ukraine, due west. Since the war started, that snail would have moved further than the Russians have been able to move. Now, what's actually going on here? Well, the Russians want the region of the Donbass, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, and I apologize, but the reason is because they want a broad swath of land all the way down to Crimea. They want the whole of the Sea of Azov. They want that entire territory. And Russia has the northern tip of the Sea of Azov, and they want it all. They want Mariupol. They want all the way down to Crimea. They haven't been able to take it, and they want it. In exchange, the United States would agree to secure Ukraine, to keep the Russians from ever invading the rest of Ukraine. They would give that security guarantee to include the Europeans, and they would allow the rest of Ukraine to join the EU. One of the big issues that Ukraine has to deal with is a deeply corrupt governmental structure, and the corruption has bled into Zelensky's government as well. And if they were to go into the EU, it would allow greater investigation of corruption within Ukraine. It would allow European Union monitors in. It would allow more fiscal restraints on Ukraine. It would do all sorts of things, but it would also stifle Ukrainian society because the EU is run by a bunch of nanny state bureaucrats. But by becoming part of the EU and by getting a security declaration from NATO, the Ukrainians rationalized that it would keep the Russians from invading them again. If the Russians were to invade Ukraine as part of the EU, it would be an invasion of essentially another nation state, a bigger nation state with a lot more weapons, and they would all rally for Ukraine. So this is essentially the security playbook for the Ukrainians. You can't join NATO, but NATO will secure you. And you can join the European Union. And the Russians claim they're going to be happy with it, and let's not kid ourselves. Do you really believe that Vladimir Putin is going to agree to a peace deal that includes a NATO guarantee of security for Ukraine and a European Union membership? I don't know that Russia will go along with it. I kind of think it's a fool's errand. There's something else going on here, too. The Trump administration, let's go back to the Susie Wiles interviews with Vanity Fair, where she suggested the president needs to spend more time on kitchen table issues and less on foreign policy issues. Here's the thing you got to understand. I've said it before. If you ever read presidential biographies or sit with post-presidential interviews, I know there are only like 45 men who've ever been president. Trump's 47 because he was the 45th, but you had 2 men elected twice in non-consecutive terms. You got essentially 45 men who have been president. And if you ever talk to any of them after they've been out of office, if you ever read what they've written or listened to their speeches, they freaking love foreign policy, particularly in their second terms. This president, is conforming to the pattern of every president in modern times. Why is that? Because in your first term, you're running for re-election. And your first term, you got to cater to the voters. You got to give the voters what they want to be able to get reelected. Your second term, you're never running for office again. And I would note to all my liberal friends listening right now who are convinced that Donald Trump is never going to go away, that he's going to be a dictator, this is kind of the clear sign that he's leaving office. He's behaving like every other second-term president in American history. He's focused on foreign affairs because in foreign affairs, the House of Representatives never matters and the Senate rarely matters. Essentially, in foreign affairs, the president can be a dictator. Now, this comes from the old Roman Republic. History lesson for you. You can do the Hillsdale history lessons. You can pick up on this too. The History of Rome podcast is brilliant on this. Yeah, let's talk about not the Roman Empire, but the Roman Republic. In the Roman Republic, when there was danger afoot, they would name someone a dictator. And the dictator controlled everything. But in particular, the Senate still mattered for domestic stuff in Rome. And the dictator pretty much had carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to do in foreign affairs to beat the enemy. And when the threat was over, the dictator had to give his power back. This was the thing that Julius Caesar, what was it? Was it Sulla, I think, who gave up his power and went into retirement. And Julius Caesar had written at some point what a fool he was. He was given all the power of Rome. He should have stayed. Julius Caesar decided he was going to stay. the rise of the emperor coming from Julius Caesar. He refused to give up the dictatorship, essentially, after having stormed across the Rubicon with his troops. But the idea in foreign policy is a very ancient idea that the president, like a dictator of Rome or like a king in Europe, has to be able to negotiate abroad while domestic affairs at home still matter with the Congress, still matter with the elected officials in Parliament, the Roman Senate, the American government. But notice what our founders did is in foreign affairs, the president is not allowed to enter into treaties without 2/3 of the Senate agreeing. Why? Because the Senate represents the states. The states are semi-sovereign. And if a treaty is entered into by the United States, the states are all bound to the treaty as if that treaty is part of the Constitution. So you have to have a 2/3 vote of the Senate to enter into a treaty. And it is binding on all the states. In the same way, like it takes 2/3 of the House and the Senate to amend the Constitution, it takes 2/3 of the Senate to add a treaty. Because a treaty is not the Constitution, but it's given the weight of the Constitution to the states to apply. So, for example, the water treaty between the United States and Mexico over the Colorado River, it's a treaty obligation, and the states are bound to that treaty obligation because 2/3 of the Senate agreed. And then that treaty then gives the water compact, and the water compact is negotiated every number of years. Same here. The president will, if he gives a security guarantee to Ukraine, has to go through the Senate, and if he goes through the Senate, it will take a 2/3 vote of the Senate. I'm not sure the votes are there, but having done the math in my head, I think it may be. And they'll be willing to give that guarantee. Listen, if the president goes to the Senate and says, give us this guarantee, this will bring peace to Ukraine, I think, with the exception of Rand Paul and a few others, the president can get 2/3 of the Senate to agree to this. Most of the Democrats in the Senate would go along with it. A lot of the Republicans would too. Lindsey Graham would. Tom Cotton would, I suspect. Markwayne Mullin probably would. Mitch McConnell for sure. John Thune would. You could get to 67 senators on this probably pretty easily with most of the Democrats, if not all the Democrats. It's just wild that we're here, though, isn't it? That this president of the United States who came in, make America great again, America first, is going to give a security guarantee to Ukraine to be able to wind down this war. It's good we're winding down the war. It's good that the president wants to wind down the war. I just, surprise, just it's very, very funny to see these sorts of things coming out of this Trump administration. These are the ones that you just never really expected to see. These are the ones that you never really were expecting to see come from this White House, because this White House has been very much we want out of Ukraine. J.D. Vance leads that wing of the White House. It's been a highly influential wing of the White House to get out of Ukraine, to walk away from Ukraine. This is President Zelensky speaking in a press conference about how they want this to play out.
Here, things are being created for Ukraine that should have started a long time ago, at least back in 2014. But really, in fact, considering how many wars Russia has started or supported, this should have happened even earlier. Europe has a very, very long history of wars, and it cannot afford to treat this lightly. All pressure on Russia must remain in place as long as occupation of our land continue. Russia must feel that it is a criminal and face consequences for that as long as our people remain in Russian captivity and until the Ukrainian children abducted by Russia are brought home. Sanctions must limit Russia until it shows respect for peaceful life and the rights of its neighbors. And of course, every Russian war crime must have consequences for those who committed them.
Now, here's the problem. Part of the president's plan gives blanket amnesty to all the Russians so none of the war crimes will ever be prosecuted. And there are war crimes. There are serious war crimes. We'll see if he can get this across. Listen, kudos to the president for trying to do this. I don't know that Vladimir Putin will bite, but I think a lot of the president's supporters went into this not expecting that we would give security guarantees to Ukraine that could drag us into a future land war in Europe, and yet here we are. Welcome back. What is that old Johnny Cash song?
I was toting my pack along the dusty Winnemucca Road when along came a semi with a high and canvas-covered load. If you're going to Winnemucca Mac with me, you can ride. And so I climbed into the cab and then I settled down inside.
And the chorus line is, I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. Let me read you this tweet. Everything wrong with the NIL and transfer portal in college football. Georgia State quarterback TJ Finley plans to enter the NCAA transfer portal. The former LSU, Auburn, Texas State, Western Kentucky, and Tulane quarterback is filing an NCAA waiver for a 7th year of eligibility. 7th year to play college football. Is he just hoping that someone finally gets him into the NFL? I've been everywhere, man. I've been LSU, Auburn, Texas State, Western Kentucky, Tulane, Georgia State. I've been everywhere, man. Good Lord. Everything wrong with this. This is just, wow. Maybe there's, I don't know. Maybe after Philip Rivers goes back to coaching. By the way, I said yesterday Mississippi. It's Alabama where he is. I read on ESPN, no less, that it was Mississippi. Philip Rivers, Alabama. Is it Fair Hope, I think? Anyway, yeah, maybe after he retires back from the Colts, you can go be their backup quarterback because you've been at LSU, Auburn, Texas State, Western Kentucky, Tulane, now Georgia State, and somewhere else. Good gracious. Oh, man. All right. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm. Y'all, you can get 3 of them for less than $200. The price has not gone up. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com. They are an air purifier. You get 3 of them. You save $200. You get them for less than $200. They get rid of dust, pollen, all the stuff floating in the air. They eliminate odors, and I don't actually use it as an air purifier. I use it as an odor eliminator. I've used it in rental cars where someone smoked in the rental car. I've used it in hotel rooms when people next door were smoking. It's small. I keep one in my travel bag when I travel just in case. You can plug it up with a USB cord. You can also plug it into the wall. You get one for upstairs, for downstairs, your basement, your travel bag, your RV, wherever you need them. And they just work at eliminating odors. I've used them in my kitchen when I have been cooking seafood. My wife doesn't like the smell of shrimp. I've used them on my back porch when the smoker in the backyard, the air drifted into the back room. Used it there. I've used it, again, hotel rooms, rental cars, you name it. EdenPureDeals.com is the website. Eden, like the Garden of Eden. Pure is the driven snow. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3. Get 3 of them for less than $200.